Hi, today I'm talking about the GIMP software and our digital design Surrealism assignment. So in Schoology, you're going to see the Surrealism photo montage assignment. And a photo montage is something that is going to be a collection of images that you're going to put together to make one final image. And surrealism is a type of art that often reflects something you might think of as having a dreamlike quality or a nightmare. It's where things are together, things all look real, but they are not things that you would normally see together. Some artists that you can look at over here, I've got Salvador Dali, Julia Blackman, Sandy Skoglund, Maggie Taylor, Kyle Thompson, Jerry Uelsman. All of these artists work in a surrealist type of way. So by now you've probably already downloaded GIMP, but there is a link here if you do need to do that. And so let's switch on over to that. Let me minimize that. Okay, so I already have GIMP open. You should have, once you load GIMP, you could find this little icon. Mine shows up on my desktop, and then once I click on it, it shows up down here. But depending on the type of computer you have, it may look different. However, so my version is GIMP 2.10, and what I've done is I've moved my screen over so that I can see the images that I want to drag in. I could go File and New and do things like that, but really all I need to do is drag these pictures in off the desktop. So I'm going to drag this picture in, and I'm going to get this little message over here to import the image from a color profile. So the color profiles aren't matching between what GIMP uses and what that file is. So all you need to do is click Convert, and that's fine. Okay, so now I have a beach scene, and you can see over here on the left that I'm going to add penguins to my beach scene because they don't normally belong on this type of beach. They're not usually found on a tropical beach. And so first of all, though, let's go back to this scene here. We're going to be using a number of these tools, and sometimes the best way to learn a software like this or Photoshop is to really just play around with the tools. But it's good to kind of know what some of these things mean first. The first set of tools, this whole top bar plus these three, are called selection tools. And you're going to be able to select things in different ways. So for example, the rectangle select tool, this would work best if I was trying to select something like a door or something that is square, like a box. So if I click and drag, I'm on the wrong tool. Let's go back. Here's how we can do that. Edit, we can undo, we can, if you do Command Z on my computer, it goes away. And then of course it's not going away at the moment. There we go. I just clicked on another tool and that went away. And sometimes that happens. Usually you can go up to Edit and you can say Undo, or on my computer that's going to be a Command Z, or you can say Select None. All right, but anyway, so let's go back to this. We've got our rectangle tool, and now you can see that my cursor has kind of a little box next to it. And those little crosshairs, that's where it's going to start drawing. So if I click, I'm clicking and holding and dragging, and then it's going to select a box. And then I can do all kinds of things with that box. I can move the box. I could scale, move that, do things, scale it in a different way. But that's really not useful for what I'm doing right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and say Edit and Undo. The oval, the ellipse tool is going to be something similar, but this time it's going to make something that's like a circle or an oval. And we've got our free select tool, magic wand tool, which sometimes I'm saying words that I'm used to in Photoshop, but fuzzy select tool here. This is a color tool that you're going to select by color. So I'm going to just show you this one. If I click on blue, it's going to click on an area of blue, but it didn't get all the blue. And that's probably because I don't have, let's get down here. I don't have the correct settings. So most of these tools up here can be adjusted down here. And every time you click on a different tool, this might look a little different. So what really matters here is that my threshold is set at 6.2. And I would want the threshold to be much higher, and it'll select more blues. So if I'm going to hit Command Z just to start over, get rid of that selection. And if I take this threshold and I make it bigger, let's say I make it, I don't know, 100 something. Okay, anyway, that's fine. Now when I click on the blue, I'm just clicking one time, you can see it has selected the blue sky and the blue water, and it's even getting some of these areas over in the sand. So that threshold was obviously too high. This is not my favorite tool because it's hard to get it to be exactly what you want unless the colors are very hard-edged. Whereas these, they tend to kind of be like a gradation that fade into each other. So this doesn't really do a good selection. All right, so I'm going to undo that one again. And we've got a couple other selection tools. I use these a little bit less. And then the next thing that's going to be important is, we're not going to be using the color picker today, but the zoom tool. So if you do want to zoom in on something and get closer, notice that when I click on the zoom tool, this area changed. So now I can tell it to zoom in or out. If I say zoom in and I click, it's going to zoom in. If I say zoom out, it's going to zoom out. Okay? That'll come in handy a little bit later when we're trying to get some fine details of the edges finished. So once again, if I click back to this color tool, now it looks different down here. So every time I click on a tool, here's my scale tool we're going to use, that changes. Okay? So let's go ahead and bring in one of these little guys. Let's bring on one of these penguins. And again, I'm just going to drag this penguin in. And he's going to show up somewhere. Let's see. Oh, there he is. Oh my gosh. So that penguin is quite large. Let me move this over so you can see the rest of this screen. And the first thing I need to do is I need to scale him down. So I'm on the scale tool and I'm going to just drag this down. I'm doing kind of a click and drag as I do that. And then I have to go back straight above that is the move tool. And I can move it so I can see it a little better. Okay, so he's quite large, and in fact, this looks like a stuffed animal. That's okay. So now what I want to do is I want to get rid of all this white because I want him to look like he's there at the beach. So I can try to use this color tool, the select tool by color. And if I click on the white, it's clicking all the white areas. However, remember the threshold is really high. So the white went into like the white of the chest here. And so let's undo that. And let's put the threshold back down really low. Maybe like on something like 10. Okay. I don't know why it says 10.2, but all right. So there we go. Now you can see the edges. In Photoshop, sometimes we call those the marching ants. So everything is edged with these little things. So my white is selected out here, but it didn't select the white of the tummy. Okay, so now if I just do something like Command X or delete, then it's going to take all of that away. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's zoom in. I want to get a little closer to this guy, and especially near the feet here and there here. I'm going to also want to get rid of the little marching ants, these little dotted lines. So let's get rid of those by just saying select none. Okay, now I can see the edges and I can see that they're not perfect. Okay, there's a little bit of white here on these edges. So we want to take the eraser, which, let me see, where did the eraser go? Sorry, guys. Let's see. Here it is. Oh, the eraser tool. Okay. And so when I click on that, again, I'm going to have lots of choices down here. And two things that are the most important. One is the opacity. The opacity means how solid are you going to erase. So 100% is going to take all of it away. If I had it at 50%, it's going to be kind of see-through or transparent. It's not going to erase it completely. So I want to leave it on 100% for now. The hardness is also important. This hardness here, because that determines how the edges, if they're sharp or not. So I'll come back to that in a minute. But first of all, my brush size is way too big. You can see this giant circle. That's my brush. So if I were to erase right now, it's going to erase way too much. Although, if you notice, this is a very soft edge. You can see that the edges are kind of fuzzy, okay? So let's undo that. And the other thing I forgot to mention, let me just come over to the right-hand side over here for a second. Once I added the penguin in, I have 2 layers now. Before I had 1 layer. I had the beach layer, and now I have this penguin. If I was on the beach layer and I do the eraser, it's going to erase the beach. But I want to erase parts of the penguin, so I want to make sure that I'm on that layer. So you can see that I'm clicking between the 2 layers. And so any changes you want to make are going to need to be on that layer that you want to make. Okay, so let's make our brush size much smaller. You can also scrub. If you've ever done video editing, scrubbing is just moving this back and forth, and that will also work. So I can just scrub this down to something small, probably even smaller than that. Okay, I want a tiny little brush for my eraser, and I want the hardness to be 100%. So it might be quicker to scrub it. Pretty close. Okay, let's go. There we go. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to use my eraser to try to get the edges look a little nicer. This is going to be the most time-consuming part of this assignment, where you want to clean up your edges. That's something I'm really looking for when I'm grading. I want to see that it doesn't look like you copied and pasted. I want it to look like it's really there. Okay? So you would do this over most of those edges. Those feet already look a little bit better because they don't have this little halo of white around it. Okay? So that's a little bit better. All right, let's see. Let's zoom back out. So I'm going to go to my magnifying glass, zoom out, and I'm going to click on it. So you can see those feet look okay. And now let's just talk about this piece here. If I want to flip it, have them facing another way, it's one of these tools here. I think it's maybe this one. No, that's rotate. This one here, the transform tool. All right, so I should be able to, I think there's seeing if there's a flip here. Not finding it. Maybe that's not quite the right one. But we can rotate. So you can rotate like this if I want to do anything like that. So basically get into these tools, play around a bit. Oh, there it is. There's my flip. Okay. So now I can flip either vertically or horizontally. And if I click, he's going to flip. Okay. If I do vertical, he's going to be upside down. Okay. So finally, what I want to do is I want to move him, and I want him to look like he's like a giant penguin in the water. So like he's like invading the beach. I want him to be a little smaller. Okay. Oops. I'll put him there. And I want him to look like he's in the water. So in order to do that, I'm going to actually just erase part of him. So I'm going to go back to the eraser over here. And let's see, I still have my opacity at 100%, although now I want the hardness a little lower because I'm going to have the edge, I want it to look a little fuzzy, like he's in the water, okay? And maybe even the opacity can come down just a little bit because I can always go over it a few times. And let's see, last thing I need to do is make the brush much bigger because right now the brush is pretty small. Okay, so there we go. So let's start erasing. So what's happening right now is I'm erasing the penguin, but but I'm not erasing the water. Okay, so now because I've got the opacity set a certain way, you can kind of see him because the opacity is not at 100%. So it actually looks like he's in the water. You can see that, you can see part of his feet and such in there. And because the edges are a little softer, then it kind of maybe looks like he's actually in the water. So for your assignment, this is basically the parts you need to know. You need to know how to select an item, get rid of the background, move it around, scale it, how to erase things. And I would think that you would want to put more than just one thing in here. So this penguin might be more interesting if people were running away scared, or if he's playing with a beach ball with some other either person or an animal or something. So I like to see things interacting. So you might have to add 2 or 3 more items in order to feel like it's finished. And yeah, so when you add more items, you're going to get more layers. Remember that. If you want to throw away a layer, you can, in Photoshop, this little trash can, but I'm pretty sure it's this X, yes. Delete this layer. So if I want to delete a layer, I'm going to hit that, okay? These eyes here are just going to turn a layer off. The layer is still there, but you just can't see it, okay? And you can also move the layers. So if I move this beach layer, if I click and drag this layer to here, now you're not seeing the penguin because he's on the lower layer. He's on the bottom layer, and the beach layer is covering that layer. So the beach layer, I want it to be down on the bottom so that I can see the penguin up top. All right, so if you have specific questions, definitely don't hesitate to email me. Let me know if you need some help. I'll be glad to help. I encourage you to look at more tools. We didn't even talk about most of these tools down here, but you can certainly just try them out. What's the worst that's going to happen? You're just going to maybe delete that project. This button here would delete your project. It's going to make it go away. So you're going to actually want to save your project. So you might do a save as, since otherwise it'll save it as my beach picture. And then you'll get a thing where you can change the name of it and decide where you want to put it. What you do want to do, although I do have GIMP on my computer. I was trying to see if there's a setting here to make it a JPEG, and I'm not seeing it just yet. So if you save it as an XCF file, I'll be able to open it because I can open it in GIMP, but it would be better if we could save it as a Photoshop. So let me see, or not, sorry, not a Photoshop, a JPEG. I'm trying to see if there's another option here. Export as, okay, and, oh yeah, now notice up here it says beach.jpg. So saving it as a JPEG or exporting it, that's going to allow people without GIMP to be able to view it. So if you're going to put it on your website, you're going to want to come to export and then save it, make sure it saves as a JPEG, because Google Sites probably won't recognize the XCF file. Okay, so better yet, come to export and save it as a JPEG. Choose where you want it to go. I'm just going to have it go to the desktop, and then I'm going to tell it to export. Looks like I already have one named that because that was my original, so I'm going to say beach 2. Okay. All right, so that's exporting. These settings are usually fine the way they are. Export, and then we're finished. So now if I close this out, it's okay because I saved it. I'm just going to minimize it right here, and I think that's all I have. So have a great day, and let me know if you have any questions.